No one dared approach her room. Then a human knocked once. The maintenance worker's discovery, the gravity stabilizer in Section 12 was acting like a drunken dancer again, spinning wildly before lurching to a complete stop every few minutes. Juno Vex had seen worse malfunctions in her 8 years maintaining the Valerian Star Cruiser, but this one had personality, the kind that made seasoned engineers curse in 3 languages and question their life choices. She crawled through the maintenance shaft, her toolkit clanking against the metal walls with each movement. The obsidian wing of the ship was always colder than the rest, its black walls seeming to absorb heat like hungry shadows. Most crew members avoided this section, claiming it felt wrong somehow. Juno had always figured that was just superstition, mixed with poor ventilation. "Diagnostics complete," announced Vega, the ship's AI, her voice echoing through Juno's earpiece. "Stabilizer malfunction appears to be originating from subsection 12 Gamma. Recommend immediate inspection." "Already on it," Juno muttered, pulling herself through a particularly narrow passage. Her headlamp cut through the darkness, illuminating conduits and cables that snaked along the walls like technological intestines. "Anything else I should know about this section? Feels like I'm crawling through a tomb." There was a pause, unusual for Vega, who typically responded within milliseconds. "No additional information available for that query." Juno frowned. Vega was many things, but evasive wasn't one of them. The AI had detailed schematics for every bolt and wire on the ship, yet somehow this section made her go quiet. Interesting. She emerged into a maintenance chamber she'd never seen before, despite having worked on this ship for nearly a decade. The room was larger than it should have been according to the blueprints burned into her memory. Stranger still, the walls here weren't the standard utilitarian gray of the rest of the ship. They were a deep, lustrous black that seemed to shimmer when she moved her light across them. "Vega," she called out, "this chamber isn't on my schematics. What's the deal?" Silence. Not even static. The gravity stabilizer hummed nearby, but the sound was different here, deeper, almost musical. Juno approached it cautiously, her engineer's instincts screaming that something was off. The device looked standard enough from the outside, but when she opened the maintenance panel, she found components she didn't recognize. Crystalline structures that pulsed with faint light, cables that felt warm to the touch, and in the center, a power coupling that seemed to be drawing energy from somewhere other than the ship's main grid. "What the hell?" she whispered, running her fingers along the alien technology. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest tight, too elegant, too perfect to be human engineering. As she worked to understand the hybrid system, her tools began to resonate with a frequency that made her teeth ache. The crystalline components brightened, and suddenly the wall behind the stabilizer began to change. What had appeared solid started to shimmer and ripple like liquid mercury, revealing the outline of a doorway that definitely wasn't supposed to exist. "Vega, are you seeing this?" Juno called out, but her earpiece remained silent. Either I was deliberately ignoring her, or something in this section was interfering with communications. The doorway solidified, becoming a seamless portal of the same dark material as the walls. No handle, no control panel, just a perfect rectangle of midnight that seemed to be waiting. Juno had always prided herself on being practical, methodical, the kind of person who read instruction manuals and followed safety protocols. But standing before this impossible door, she felt something she hadn't experienced since childhood. Pure, overwhelming curiosity. She pressed her palm against the surface. It was warm, almost body temperature, and seemed to pulse with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. The door responded immediately, sliding open with a whisper that sounded almost like a sigh of relief. Beyond lay a chamber that defied every law of starship architecture Juno knew. The space was vast, with walls that curved upward into darkness, giving the impression of being inside some great organic structure rather than a metal ship. Bioluminescent patterns traced along the surfaces like veins of starlight, pulsing gently with blues and purples that hurt to look at directly. In the center of the chamber sat a figure that made Juno's breath catch in her throat. She was unmistakably alien but hauntingly beautiful in a way that made human concepts of aesthetics feel clumsy and inadequate. Tall and elegant, with skin that shifted between deep blue and silver depending on the angle of the light. Her ears were long and delicately pointed, decorated with intricate jewelry that seemed to be growing from her flesh, rather than simply worn. Her clothing flowed around her like liquid shadow, and her eyes were the deep purple of nebulae, ancient and knowing and unutterably sad. She sat not on a throne, but on what appeared to be a living seat that had grown from the floor itself, its surface covered in the same bioluminescent patterns that decorated the walls. Around her, the air itself seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy. "You're not supposed to be here," the figure said, her voice carrying harmonics that made Juno's bones vibrate. It wasn't a threat, more like a statement of fact delivered with infinite weariness. Juno's throat felt dry. "Neither are you, I'm guessing. Ship records don't mention any passengers in this section." The alien woman's expression shifted, something that might have been amusement flickering across her features. "Passenger. Yes, one could call it that." She rose from her seat with fluid grace, and Juno realized just how tall she was. Nearly 7 feet, with proportions that were almost human but stretched in ways that suggested different evolutionary pressures. "I am Queen Nethys of the Zephyrian Empire, or I was before my relocation." Juno's mind raced. The Zephyrian Empire had been one of humanity's first major diplomatic contacts, but that was decades ago. The empire had supposedly collapsed in civil war, its royal family scattered or killed. Yet here was their queen, imprisoned in secret aboard a human vessel. "How long have you been here?" Juno asked. "Time moves differently in this place," Nethys replied, gesturing to the impossible chamber around them. "The technology that maintains this prison draws from both human engineering and Zephyrian bioarchitecture. It has been substantial." "Prison?" Juno stepped closer, her engineer's mind trying to process the hybrid technology surrounding them. "Who put you here?" Nethys tilted her head, studying Juno with those nebula eyes. "You ask dangerous questions for someone who repairs gravity stabilizers." "Yeah, well, dangerous questions come with the territory when you find impossible rooms with alien royalty in them." Juno crossed her arms. "Seriously, what's going on here? Why are you locked up? And why is the ship's AI pretending this place doesn't exist?" For the first time since Juno had entered the chamber, Nethys smiled. It was the expression of such genuine warmth that it transformed her entire face, making her seem less like an ancient queen and more like someone who had been waiting a very long time for company. "You have an interesting way of introducing yourself," Nethys said. "Most humans who have encountered me were either terrified or reverent. You seem merely curious." "Curious is my default setting," Juno replied. "Terror comes later, usually, when I realize how much trouble I'm in." Nethys laughed, a sound like silver bells in a windstorm. "Trouble, yes. You have found quite a lot of that, Juno Vex." Juno blinked. "How do you know my name?" "This chamber is alive in its way. It has been listening to your work for years, growing accustomed to your presence. You are the only human who comes to this section regularly, the only one who doesn't flee from the atmosphere here." The implications of that statement settled over Juno like a cold blanket. "You've been watching me, through the ship's systems, observing," Nethys corrected gently, "and hoping, perhaps, that someday someone would be curious enough to ask the right questions." Juno looked around the chamber, taking in the impossible architecture, the hybrid technology, the casual violation of every security protocol she could think of. "Well," she said finally, "consider the questions asked. Now how about some answers, starting with why a supposedly dead alien queen is locked up in the most classified room on a human diplomatic vessel?" Nethys settled back onto her living throne, the bioluminescent patterns around them pulsing brighter as if responding to her emotions. "That," she said, "is a story that begins with betrayal and ends with the potential destruction of everything your species has built among the stars." Juno felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the obsidian wing. "Sounds like exactly the kind of trouble I was hoping to avoid." "Then you should leave," Nethys said simply. Walk away, repair your gravity stabilizer, and pretend this place doesn't exist. It would be safer for everyone. Juno considered this for about 3 seconds. Yeah, that's not going to happen. I've never been good at walking away from broken things that need fixing. Nethys studied her for a long moment, those ancient eyes seeming to weigh something invisible. Finally, she nodded. Very well, Juno. Vex, but understand. Once you hear this story, there will be no going back to your simple life of maintaining machines. Some knowledge changes everything. Juno settled cross-legged on the warm floor of the impossible chamber, her toolkit forgotten. Beside her, try me. The Diplomat's Gambit commander Wren Blackwood had dealt with diplomatic crises before. Trade disputes that turned violent, first contact protocols gone sideways, even a memorable incident involving a trilateral species and their unfortunate habit of communicating through interpretive dance. But standing outside Captain Mortis's ready room at 0400 hours, clutching a classified briefing that made her stomach churn, Wren knew this was different. Enter, came the captain's voice, sharp with the kind of exhaustion that came from managing a ship carrying representatives from 12 different species while pretending everything was perfectly normal. Wren stepped inside to find Captain Mortis, hunched over her desk, surrounded by holographic displays showing ship schematics, crew rotations, and what appeared to be surveillance footage from the Obsidian Wing. The captain looked up, her weathered face etched with lines that seemed deeper than they had been yesterday. Commander Blackwood, I assume you've read the briefing? Yes, ma'am. Wren set the encrypted pad on the desk. Maintenance Engineer Juno, Vex accessed Section 12 Gamma approximately 6 hours ago. Security protocols were compromised. Compromised is a diplomatic way of putting it. Captain Mortis gestured to one of the displays which showed a thermal reading of the Obsidian Wing. Where Section 12 Gamma should have been, there was simply a blank space, as if the sensors couldn't penetrate whatever was happening there. Our guest has been discovered. Wren had known about the prisoner, though guest was the official designation, for 3 years, ever since her promotion to senior diplomatic liaison. Queen Nethys of the Zephyrian Empire, supposedly killed in the civil war that had torn apart humanity's most important alien ally. In reality, she'd been secretly transported aboard the Valyrian as part of a protection program that existed in the gray areas between diplomatic immunity and political asylum. What are your orders, Captain? Mortis stood, moving to the viewport that overlooked the ship's diplomatic quarters. Beyond the reinforced transparent aluminum, Wren could see the soft glow of various atmospheric processors maintaining environments suitable for their diverse passenger manifest. Officially, contain the situation, ensure our maintenance engineer understands the classified nature of what she's discovered, maintain operational security. And unofficially, the captain's reflection in the viewport looked older than her 53 years. Unofficially, Commander, I'm wondering if it's time to ask ourselves whether we're protecting Queen Nethys or imprisoning her. Wren felt something cold settle in her chest. Ma'am? The Zephyrian Civil War ended 2 months ago, Commander. Their new government has been asking questions about their missing queen. Questions that are becoming harder to deflect. Mortis turned back to face Wren. And there are members of our own diplomatic corps who seem very interested in ensuring those questions remain unanswered. The implications hit Wren like a physical blow. She'd served in the military before transitioning to diplomatic service, had seen enough political maneuvering to recognize a conspiracy when it was laid out in front of her. You think someone on this ship is actively working to keep Queen Nethys hidden? I think, Commander, that you need to get down to Section 12 Gamma and assess the situation personally. Talk to our maintenance engineer, talk to our guest, and then you need to help me figure out what the hell we're going to do about it. 20 minutes later, Wren found herself standing in the maintenance corridor outside Section 12 Gamma, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. According to her scanner, there was nothing here but standard ship infrastructure. According to her eyes, there was clearly a doorway in the wall that definitely hadn't been there the last time she'd inspected this section. She approached the door cautiously, noting the way it seemed to shimmer slightly at the edges, as if it existed in a state of quantum uncertainty. Her security clearance should have been sufficient for any area of the ship, but when she pressed her palm to the scanner, Nothing happened. Interesting, she murmured, then raised her voice. This is Commander Blackwood requesting entry. The door responded immediately, sliding open with that same whispered sigh Juno had heard hours earlier. Wren stepped through into the impossible chamber beyond, her diplomatic training warring with her military instincts as she tried to process what she was seeing. The first thing that struck her was the scale. This room was larger than the ship's main assembly hall, yet somehow existed within a section that should have been barely big enough for maintenance equipment. The second thing was the technology, a seamless blend of human engineering and something distinctly organic, alive in a way that made her skin crawl and her breath catch simultaneously. And then she saw them. Juno Vex sat cross-legged on the floor, near the center of the chamber, her maintenance coveralls looking absurdly mundane against the backdrop of living walls and bioluminescent patterns. Across from her sat Queen Nethys, and Wren felt her diplomatic composure crack slightly at the sight of the Zephyrian royal. She was exactly as described in the classified files. Tall, elegant, with that distinctive blue-silver skin and the elongated ears that marked her species. But the files hadn't captured the presence she carried, the way she seemed to command the space around her simply by existing within it. Even sitting casually on what appeared to be a throne grown from the floor itself, she radiated a kind of authority that made Wren want to stand at attention. "Commander Blackwood," Nethys said, her voice carrying those impossible harmonics that made human vocal cords seem clumsy by comparison. "I wondered when they would send someone official." Wren straightened, falling back on diplomatic protocols. "Your Majesty, I'm here to assess the damage," Nethys interrupted gently, "to determine how much your maintenance engineer has learned, and what must be done to maintain the illusion of my death." Juno looked up from where she'd been examining some kind of crystalline device. "Actually, we were just discussing how royalty ended up locked in a secret room on a human ship while everyone thinks she's dead. Funny thing, nobody seems to have a good answer for that." Wren felt the careful diplomatic balance she'd spent years perfecting begin to wobble. "Ms. Vex, you need to understand that there are security considerations." "Oh, I understand plenty," Juno said, climbing to her feet with a grunt. "I understand that this chamber has been here for years, drawing power from the ship's main grid and using it to maintain what's basically a luxury prison cell. I understand that the ship's AI has been programmed to ignore this section completely, which takes some serious high-level authorization. And I understand that someone's been going to a lot of trouble to keep Queen Nethys here, while telling everyone she's dead." Wren looked between Juno and Nethys, seeing the challenge in the engineer's eyes and something that might have been approval in the Queen's. "The situation is complex." "Complex," Nethys repeated, rising from her throne with that fluid grace that marked her species. "Yes, that is one word for it. Shall I tell her the truth, Commander? Or would you prefer to maintain your diplomatic fictions?" "Your Majesty, please." 3 years ago, Nethys continued, ignoring Wren's attempt at interruption, "I was approached by representatives of your government. They told me that my life was in danger, that elements within the Zephyrian Empire were planning my assassination. They offered protection, sanctuary aboard this vessel while they worked to stabilize the situation." Juno crossed her arms. "Doesn't sound like a prison so far." "No," Nethys agreed. "The prison came later when I began to ask questions about the intelligence they had received, when I requested to speak with other members of my government to coordinate with loyalist forces, when I expressed a desire to return to my people once the immediate danger had passed." Wren felt her stomach drop. "Your Majesty, they told me it wasn't safe," Nethys continued, "that the situation was still too volatile. Months passed, then a year, then 2, and gradually I began to understand that I was not being protected. I was being removed." "Removed from what?" Juno asked. "From the equation," Wren said quietly, the pieces falling into place with horrible clarity. "The Zephyrian Civil War wasn't about succession or territory. It was about trade agreements, mining rights, the kind of deals that are much easier to negotiate when you don't have a legitimate ruler asking inconvenient questions about colonial exploitation." Nethys nodded slowly. The new Zephyrian government is much more accommodating to human interests than I would have been, and they were able to take power because the queen who might have opposed them was tragically killed in the opening days of the conflict. Juno looked between them. Except she wasn't actually killed. No, Ren said, feeling the weight of complicity settling on her shoulders. She was just made to disappear, kept comfortable, kept safe, kept completely isolated from any ability to influence events. The chamber pulsed around them, the bioluminescent patterns brightening as if responding to the emotional tension in the room. Nethys moved to one of the walls, pressing her palm against it in a gesture that seemed both intimate and familiar. "This place has been my world for 3 years," she said softly. "It responds to me, learns from me, grows with me. In some ways, it has become more home than any palace I ever knew, but it is still a cage." Ren activated her comm, not surprised when she got only static. "They're jamming communications to this section." "They have been for some time," Nethys confirmed. "Your ship's AI, Vega, is remarkably thorough in her programming. She cannot see this place, cannot record what happens here, cannot report our conversations. Whoever arranged my imprisonment was very careful about covering their tracks." "Not careful enough," Juno said grimly. "They didn't count on a broken gravity stabilizer leading someone down here, and they definitely didn't count on me being too stubborn to walk away once I found something interesting." Ren looked around the impossible chamber, at the hybrid technology that had created this pocket of existence within the ship, at the Queen, who had been erased from galactic politics, at the maintenance engineer who had stumbled into a conspiracy by pure accident. "We need to get you out of here." "And go where?" Nethys asked. "My people believe I am dead. My government has been replaced by one that profits from my absence, and there are clearly individuals within your own command structure who have invested considerable resources in maintaining this situation." "Then we change the situation," Juno said. "We break the story wide open. Diplomatic immunity works both ways, right? If everyone knows Queen Nethys is alive, it becomes a lot harder to keep her locked up." Ren felt her military training reassert itself. "That's assuming we can get past whoever's been maintaining this cover-up. They've had years to establish their networks, their protocols, and they clearly have access to high-level command functions. If they can program the ship's AI to ignore an entire section, then we go around them," Juno said. "I may not know politics, but I know systems, and every system has vulnerabilities." Nethys moved back to her throne, settling onto it with a thoughtful expression. "There is another consideration. The chamber itself is sentient in its way. It has been my companion for these years, responding to my needs, learning from my presence. I cannot simply abandon it." "Bring it with us," Juno said immediately. "The core technology is portable. I can see the modular connections. We extract the essential components, set up a mobile unit. You don't lose your companion, and we don't leave behind evidence of the prison." Ren stared at the engineer. "You want to steal an alien hybrid biocomputer from a classified section of a diplomatic vessel?" Juno grinned. "When you put it like that, it sounds almost reasonable." Despite everything, Ren found herself smiling back. "You know what? It really does." She turned to Nethys. "Your Majesty, if we can get you to the diplomatic quarters, if we can establish communications with the Zephyrian government, if we can survive the attempt," Nethys added, "those who arranged my imprisonment will not appreciate our efforts to undo their work." "Then we'd better move fast," Ren said, her military instincts taking over. "Juno, how long to make the necessary extractions?" "Give me 2 hours, maybe 3 if the biocomponents are more integrated than they look." "You have 1 hour," Ren said. "After that, people are going to start asking questions about why a diplomatic commander is missing from her scheduled duties." She looked around the chamber one more time, memorizing the impossible architecture that had housed this conspiracy. "Your Majesty, are you ready to be alive again?" Nethys stood, and for the first time in 3 years, her smile held no sadness at all. "Commander Blackwood, I have been ready since the day I arrived.